panel discussion from military precision to startup agility, how veterans can lead in disruptive technologies and startup. Today, we have a diverse group of experts representing both the dynamic startup ecosystem and an established corporate giant. They will share their insights on how veterans can leverage their unique experience to drive success in these rapidly evolving environments. First up, Priya Rajesh, COO, Style Buddy India. With over 2 decades of experience, Priya is an accomplished executive with deep expertise in driving digital transformation, brand development, business growth across diverse industries. As a startup CEO and a forward thinking leader, Priya is constantly exploring new ways to innovate and deliver value. Next up, Ravindra Verma. Ravindra, Head, Shoring Business, NTT Data Business Solutions Private Limited. Ravindra is a seasoned leader with over 2 decades of industry experience and a decade of impactful leadership at NTT Data. In his current role, he is responsible for shoring business while serving customers globally. Previously, he has served as the CEO of India Business Unit and been instrumental in driving business growth and fostering innovation over the years. With a robust background in consulting, pre sales, solutions, business development, Ravindra has consistently elevated his roles. Next up, we have Purva Gera, CHRO by Economy. Purva has worked with leaders and organizations across multiple industries and countries to help transform company culture and create a better, inclusive work environment. She has been the General Secretary of the WICCI National Banking and Credit Council and is on the steering committee of various educational institutes. Her purpose in life is to create a supportive ecosystem for caregivers of people with mental illness. Next up is Yogesh Thakur, CEO and Director, Deep Pulse Limited. Yogesh headed the workforce supply chain function as Vice President for one of the largest global IT consulting companies for over 12 years. Before becoming an entrepreneur, he has held many leadership roles managing large, complex business units over his career spanning 35 years in multiple countries. We are excited to have you all with us today. Let's dive straight into our first question. Do you think veterans have what it takes to be an entrepreneur and thrive in a startup environment? Priya, can we start with you first?
Sure. I think it's a very interesting question, Rashmi. I think if you look step for a moment, take a few seconds to think about, what typically is entrepreneurship all about. It's all about risk taking. Um, you are usually trying to forge a new frontier, try to solve a problem that's not been looked at before, and it comes with its risks. It comes with a need for a lot of diligence in the way you're going to structure your business and prepare it for growth, and it needs this kind of a character to put yourself out there and kind of wave your flag all the time, carry your business on your sleeve, so to say. And then now for a moment, take those characteristics and think about what any veteran would probably have to go through in their experience, right, with the forces. Risk taking, yes, I mean, we all here agree. They are taught to constantly assess risk, constantly evaluate risk, evaluate strategies to mitigate risk. And with that obviously comes with a great deal of diligence in understanding the constraints they are working with, the limited resources that they're working with. And I think the natural problem solvers, it's built into them, having served in the forces. Personally, if you ask me, and also having worked with quite a few veterans who've come out of the forces and been with startups or seen them grow young companies to great folds, I think they are like what most suited. I mean, if because it's very difficult to find a good blend of these qualities, also ingrained, right?
Yeah.
Through their exposure. So I mean, personally, I think that's a great, they have a great mix of these skills that makes them, great for entrepreneurship if they're willing to get into it. That is.
Absolutely, absolutely. Wonderful. I'd like to also get maybe reaction from Ravindra. You, what do you feel? Coming obviously from the background, which is not very startup, but as even as a mature systems, we in our pockets, in our smaller pockets, also push our employees to innovate, to be more curious, to question, and to have that entrepreneurial streak. I believe we all do that in bigger corporations, especially like an entity. We've seen that as well. What's your reaction to it, and what do you feel about it?
Sure, and thanks, Priya, for all your comments. See, this topic had been discussed from last little more, I would say, aggressively when there was the scheme called Agnivir was launched, and right from Mr. Anand Mahindra and multiple other leaders jumped into the discussions over Twitter or X. And there were multiple social media discussions and various analysts getting into this conversation about how do we absorb veterans at various levels. So here we're not referring to someone who's coming out of, say, short service commission or someone who's coming out with a certain degree. Here we're trying to talk about, trying to discuss about people at every level, veterans at every level with different and varied kind of skill sets. Right now, there are certain common areas that Priya beautifully touched upon, be it integrity, be it honesty, be it discipline, nature, etc., etc. But we need to also probably look at the kind of world we are today existing in, right? So a lot of analysts term it as the VUCA world, right, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Now, VUCA world, if you have to draw a parallel with anything what these veterans might have seen or might have trained into, is more warlike, right? In a typical war, could be an urban warfare, could be a guerrilla warfare, could be a different kind of, be naval warfare, right? The thing that becomes really of prized possession is your presence of mind, your process orientedness, your preparedness. Now, these are factors that come to the fore in today's world. The change, the pace with which technology is evolving and changing, the pace with we go through any geopolitical scenario, be it COVID, when a vaccine had to be developed in a pharmaceutical industry versus the supply chain challenges that we have seen during Suez Canal episode that has happened. Things are evolving so rapidly and so quickly. We need leaders at every industry, at every level. Now, when we say leaders, leaders are not only someone who leads business and is responsible for P&L. We are talking of individuals who can take accountability and responsibility and address a given situation in the best of their abilities. And this is something that our veterans are trained into, right? Look at the startup ecosystem in India. It is evolving, puzzling with so much of energy, extremely vibrant, right? But then are there no challenges? Absolutely, there are a lot of challenges. And across industry, we need people who can get in and make a difference felt. Now, there are multiple government schemes that probably I will touch upon a little later, but then when government has dived into it to support the startup ecosystem and also support the veterans to be absorbed into the overall chain of things. So I must say that this is pretty exciting times for people who come with certain kind of preparedness, certain kind of training, and certain kind of exposure, which otherwise would not be available in the market. So absolutely a thing to look forward to for them.
Super, super exciting. And I think the way we are looking at the evolving business scenarios, I think that's a very pertinent point, Ravindra, you bring in. And I think with that, I would love to get reactions from Purva, as a CHRO of a, big tech company and the startup, and how things are evolving at your side as well. So, and as well as Yogesh. What are some of the interesting maybe sectors that are emerging that you believe is definitely carved out for this niche environment, niche ecosystem that we're talking about, and how we can leverage this talent more and more because of obviously the innate quality that they bring in just because of their experience and exposure in military.
Sure. So, which industries are perfect for veterans? Two that come at the top of my mind, and of course, you guys can add more. Definitely cybersecurity, supply chain, right? That's totally their jam, and they know. In fact, there's so much that these industries can learn from our veterans, right? Now, I would also like to highlight to your previous point, veterans really excel at structure. So that's the beauty. They get a lot of structure, but at the same time, startups do need a lot of fast decision making, right? So I think what is it that the veterans would actually need to do would be a lot of unlearning, and I'm sure we're going to touch upon that in a bit. But if you were to just again reflect on veterans' ability to make ethical decisions under pressure, taking care of few clear regulations, these are the much needed sense of accountability and ownership traits that they bring to the industries. So clearly we have a lot of need for such people to actually step up and take these roles that are available, and there's dearth for talent in such industries, definitely.
Thanks, Purva, for that.
Purva,
Absolutely. Please, Yogesh, go ahead. Yes.
yeah, I was about to say that, Purva, I agree with you about the unlearning piece. After almost 35 years of being in the corporate sector and having that structured way of working, once I became an entrepreneur, the first thing was to figure out I have to do more things that I never did as an employee. And those are the kind of things that start becoming difficult. So unlearning is definitely a point that I would have also brought in. We get into the habit of different parts of our organizations and using them for doing certain kinds of work. And suddenly, even if I was a veteran and I'm perfectly fine and having an ability to face enemy fire, I'm not so sure when it becomes a GST notice, for example. And suddenly I don't know what am I supposed to do now because I've never come across something like this.
Yes.
So there are lots of different kinds of things that happen which we never see as part of our day-to-day work. And suddenly, as an entrepreneur, there are things that are coming to our lap, and we don't have a structured way of going back to somebody else to solve the problem for us. So definitely that aligning piece is one. Specific to sectors, I like that. Although I like the piece you said about logistics, because ration and ammunition both getting into the right places at right time, and especially mapping that onto the railway network, that has been very well thought out and done work. But I'm not so sure about the cybersecurity piece because not everybody there has access to the technology that will be required to get into cybersecurity. But on the other side, there are things that these people have done. For example, not only the war, but also the civilian exercises that they have to do, the help that they do in disasters. Those are the things that help bring them into handling different kinds of people. And that also makes them good for running something which is kind of a hospitality kind of a business. Because logistics, definitely, I mean, a packer and mover kind of business can definitely be done. Security, because typically I've seen that people who are coming out, they're trusted to run security of an establishment. That is a no-brainer. It just happens along with it. But the new way of working in terms of the startups and the defense startups that are coming in, whether they are drones, whether they are ammunition related, rockets areas, people, veterans who have worked in those areas of that, or people who have worked in signal core can get onto telecom. So those are the different kinds of things in terms of sectors that they can look at. All of us look into what we have done, what kind of problems we have faced before we come out with an idea that we are trying to solve. And that's where I think we then have to make that balance.
Beautiful points.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think what you touched upon, Yogesh, is really important. As veterans, you got to roll up your sleeves and just get the job done. I think that is just so important. And many come with that mindset and at least that josh to do. But ultimately, because it's such an ambiguous environment at times, even for like seasoned professionals like us, we've all, at least talk about more than a decade for sure, everyone, right? So that's something very, very important. And to your point, like mapping it to the skills or the experiences in the military, translating that to a civilian job or rather a corporate job is something that's really pertinent at both the sides for business as well as veterans to do that. So I think that's a very, very valid point. Um, I'm going to get on to the next one, which I feel is slight continuation to the same conversation we're just having, guys. So, in terms of and Purva, maybe you briefly touched upon that. So, what do you guys think in terms of role of a military veteran when it comes to using AI, or basically ethical use of disruptive technologies like AI, given their complex nature and given the exposure a lot of these military folks will have. Yes, I agree to Yogesh's point out everyone, but yes, there is a segment which specializes in military intelligence and does a lot of work around this area. And do you feel this group is more suited for opportunities and work in this area versus maybe the other regular talent pool that we will assess? And maybe we can start with, I don't know,
I
Purva,
don't
you
know.
want to?
Let me share some views from my perspective. So first of all, Rashmi, I think I just want to take one point from Yogesh back into this conversation is, that even for many of us without the services background, right? When we leave structured corporate environments, come into entrepreneurship, we do have to unlearn, relearn, and actually learn on the go as well. It's never a constant, right? Things are ever changing. We're learning. And to that point, they have a level playing field when they leave the forces and come, because, right, it's actually an advantage for them because they are dealing with the uncertainties that the market is throwing, just like any one of us. What they have
Absolutely.
to their advantage is, of course, the diligence and a little bit more, I would say, integrity, and a better perhaps more exposure to problem solving. Right now, having said that, I would think that looking at core technology kind of service segments, if and Yogesh pointed out very beautifully that only certain aspects, I think, of the armed forces, people who work on the technical stream, and that too in very relevant technical streams, would probably be suitable for very deep tech, especially those that are being used for government projects again, right, in terms of application. And I would presume there could be some sort of I wouldn't say non-compete, but some kind of differentiation, if they could come back and work with corporate India on certain segments, right? Having coming from the services, I believe there could be some reservations there from a policy perspective. However, I think generic technical stream can move into industry, particularly in the R&D space. In tech and R&D space, I think they bring that kind of skill set and would be suitable in those areas. So I'd like to hear from Purva as well, in the kind of the role she's leading, what her take on that is.
He could
Got
be
it.
on mute, Purva.
I don't know. I think, Purva, are you still there?
She probably is on mute.
Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Yes, we can.
Or sorry, there was a lot of background noise, so I had to put you on mute, but back now. So, to answer your question, veterans really are experienced in managing complex and high stakes scenarios, right? That gives them a very strong ethical foundation, which is essential as we navigate disruptive technologies like AI, blockchain. These are the two most emerging ones, right? Because I come from the Web3 environment, they are building the next generation of net and all the decentralized applications. There are a lot of significant ethical concerns around privacy and decentralization. And this is where veterans' decision making frameworks that are rooted in ethics, risk assessment, accountability, these are super invaluable to a space which is moving so fast and without regulation. So I'm pretty sure what needs to be done is like establishing like a bridge, identifying what kind of maybe trainings should be made available so that they are exposed to some of this and we are able to leverage such an amazing talent pool out there. Because like for example at Biconomy, we value ownership and accountability, and veterans bring like a similar mindset to the table, ensuring that innovation just doesn't come at the cost of ethical responsibility. So this is where I see this immense potential. But yes, there has to be efforts at the end, and that's where I guess Ekam is a beautiful initiative, right? Because we are not just going ahead placing the veterans, but also identifying opportunities and finding the gateway to enable our veterans to be able to figure such jobs out. So yeah, that's my take.
I agree, Dhruva. The transition is definitely important and how they do it. That specifically, if we go back and look at when the military veterans are being recruited, there is a kind of people that are being seen or looked at for becoming part of our military, right? So these are the people that have to be moldable into the way the military functions, like we all do for our own organizations when we are recruiting, that we look at people who will be fit for our organization. That's how they have also been brought in. And they continue to do things in the same way. So they are being taught to figure out when to be at their best behavior and maybe the beast behavior in them if they are facing those kind of people. Both the things are very well ingrained in the way they function, and hence I agree that the ethics part of it they just bring along with them, and they will be able to do the work in a better way than some of us who have not had that kind of background, because this comes without even thinking along with everything else that they do, and that's why they may be more suitable for certain kind of jobs.
See, I would say there are two things to this topic, right? One is where are they compared to others in the market, right? And technologies like artificial intelligence, we spoke about blockchain, we have seen robotic process automation, IoT, blah blah, right? These technologies, the pace with which they have evolved, they've kind of brought everyone at the same level, right? So there is a level playing field, right? There are only very few leading, I would say, organizations that probably know how to appropriately use artificial intelligence. But then today we interact with so many customers, and they all are struggling with the same question: what do we do out of this technology? How do we use it, etc., etc.? So one thing is the level playing field is right here, right now. We all are starting, as Priya mentioned, that unlearning thing, as Yogesh mentioned, right? So we are all there. We all will have to start right from ground zero for such technology like AI. The other side is how important it is to be technically adept at the technology aspects of the nature of the work, and to which I would say that there is things like large learning models, right? Algorithms. It's like training the machine learning model. You ground the data, etc. Now, these are the topics are best left these days to the experts, and what and where actually the market is for is the application. How do you actually apply the things which are already available to assess the situation and apply it? And if you look at these veterans, they come from diverse field, although many a times when we talk we think they are people who just go out on the border and fight, but then there are some excellent physicians out there, there are some excellent engineers out there that we've just spoken about, right? So they come from varied background, and for them to assess the situation, for them to check the applicability of any such technology is, I would say, as equal or little better when they come up with all those ethical training, etc., etc. They are much better placed. So I would say that it is not necessary for them to understand and know how to design an LLM, but then absolutely they are well placed to assess where it be applied. So this is the level playing field. I definitely think that this is the right time for them to get into, even if it is the modern technology that we're dealing with.
Absolutely. And I think that's a very valid point you brought, Ravindra, because a lot of them would come from very diverse, varied background. And, that ability to connect dots, ability to say that if you know a bit of technology and you can map it to their applications in terms of different sectors and how it can be, I think that's very powerful way to look at things. And so many opportunities across the spectrum that we're talking about.
See,
Yeah.
there is a section which starts when the people are just getting out of high school and they start with the NDAs kind of scenario. They have not had the training to be an engineer, so they are practice the technology probably, but not necessarily learned how to make the technology. And that's why I agree with Ravindra that maybe the application is the area that we should look at rather than making the from scratch kind of technology.
Yeah, yeah.
They can't be part of the development process. And
Yes.
some of there are some organizations, some of our government, larger government organizations, that's doing R&D on behalf of the services, right? And perhaps those organizations are suited to take in some of the very some of the few perhaps in the services who can come into the development side of things. But Ravindra was spot on in saying that they are probably most suited to help us navigate the application side of some of the technologies like that. So I think that's a great space they can add value in.
Yep, yep, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. I think very, very interesting thoughts there. And moving it a little in a different direction now, I would love to get thoughts around how do you all feel veterans can navigate different work cultures, in terms of collaboration, in terms of work ethics, in terms of, just the way they get things done when you talk about some millennials, Gen Zs, and the kind of expectation each of these different personas would have from their work, from their values and expectation standpoint from their employers. How do you feel they can be better prepared because they will end up working with them anyways? Yeah, I would love to get maybe Purva. Why don't we start with you? Let's get your views
Yeah.
and then we all get cracking.
Yeah, this is my favorite topic. So, because I deal with it, kind of on a day-to-day basis. And see, how do veterans, first of all, navigate the startup cultures? I think what is extremely important for us to understand is how Gen Zs work, because a lot of this, workforce is not even millennial. Like I'm a millennial. Now we have Gen Zs. Most of them are Gen Zs. So Gen Zs is equals to casual, fast-paced, meme-loving generation, right? Veterans is equals to formal, structured, mission-driven. Now the sweet spot, both want to make things or work on things that matter. That's where the common ground is, right? So to vibe with Gen Z's, veterans would need to unlearn the rigid email chains, jump into Slack, realize that in startups there's a fail forward culture which is extremely important. And I think this doesn't come naturally per my understanding, because I do have a lot of veteran friends as well, because veterans are used to, they're wired for precision because failures are costly, but in startups failing is learning, right? Veterans will need to embrace mistakes as learnings. That's like in Biconomy, MVPs are actually for days. Sometimes things change at the drop of a hat. So, how do you unlearn the fear of failure and really get into and understand the culture of this whole move the needle in a startup? I think this is where navigating through becomes extremely important. So, getting them used to this informal culture, but at the same time how do they still drive results within that informal culture, helping them understand that short run goals mean goals for the next 15 days in startups. Like we can't even plan for the next 3 months, right? So some of these things become extremely important.
See, one thing I would add here, and that kind of eased out a lot of, I would say, eagerness on this particular topic after Purva has probably started it. She's an expert at it. But then one thing I would like to probably also get comments from other panelists and Purva yourself. When we look at the young generation, the Gen Zs, the Gen Ys, and the upcoming generation in the armed forces versus in the civilian world, they behave very differently, right? So it's not that people in armed forces are not exposed to this new generation. There are recruits who are in their early 20s, etc. But then there is a sense of uniformity that is imbibed in them, right? So when they operate with a certain kind of standardized mindset, standardized approach, versus in the civilian perspective, uh, they are allowed to come up with their own self, right? The culture is so very different, right? So of course, while they would have exposed or may have got exposed to working with young people around them, but then in more standardized manner, versus when they come out suddenly in a civilian world wherein everyone has a choice, everyone would like to would be open in sharing their thoughts and act in their own unique manner. And then to deal with this kind of situation, I'm so sure they'll have to get through a certain kind of that again unlearning and then relearning process of how to get absorbed in the civilian society. And I'm so sure that there are multiple companies out there, right? Be it Mahindra's, be it TCS, and multiple global companies that have designed these programs for them to expose them to how to operate in this kind of environment. But then, yes, it may not be an easy thing, and I definitely feel that it is not at all easy also for us to behave to deal with such young folks, because they are extremely
Yeah.
sharp. Availability of information and that matched with their intelligence is at a different level altogether. So it is difficult for us. For them, it would certainly be difficult. They will have to go through a certain kind of program.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I call this also kind of, the word butterfly effect is used in different other fields, but I like to call this the butterfly effect in the workforce today, right? It's so difficult to hold them down today. In some ways, it's a boon, some ways, it's a bane. In some ways, it's a boon because, like Purva very rightly mentioned, today it's all about fail forward, fail multiple times. And that's how you are progressing in your thought process. You're just not waiting for somebody to tell you whether it's going to be right or wrong. You're doing it yourself, failing, looking forward to failing, and moving on to the other thing. So I think that is probably the biggest challenge veterans are going to face when they come into a very structured environment. But given that they are very good at adapting to situations, I'm hoping, right, that they would be able to bring that adaptability to the fore. And it's, I think, it's kind of important for us as folks who are bringing them into the workforce as well, to be kind of considerate of the programs we are putting out there, to integrate them and bring their best out, right? Have to tell them you have to unlearn and relearn, but in the best way possible, that they are able to kind of integrate quickly and be part of the growth strategy the organization might have for them. And Ravindra, I mean, I think it's going to be very difficult for any one of us to even accept that we've learned how to work with Gen Zs. I'm still learning. I think I'm a big failure. I'm still struggling. I sometimes have to depend on the Gen Zs in my family to even kind of decipher some of the words that are being used on a
Lingos, yeah.
constant basis. And I think Yogesh would, we've probably also been in corporate, in the kind of environments we've been in is very difficult. So again, another place where veterans are going to be in a level playing field with some of us to unlearn and
Yeah, Priya,
relearn.
I was about to say that whether veteran or not, after working for 35 years, you have gone through so many generations like me that yes, I have been adapting. And doesn't matter whether I was veteran or not, I had to go to the next generation and figure out a way of working. And yes, we have to adapt. Yes. The only thing that I wanted to add to all of this was, see, there are programs where people do come out of military even after 5 years of being in commission.
Yes.
So they are not going to have that kind of a gap. They will be able
Right.
to do that much more quickly. It's like any of us working in a particular organization for 20 years, it becomes difficult after 20 years to get into the new one. It's going to have something similar. So whether we are veterans or not, I think it is similar to both, whether with a veteran or non-veteran, because we have the same kind of problems, whichever background that we come from.
I think a
Got
very
it.
good point that you actually made, because I would just like to add one more point. It's not just about Gen Zs, it's also about adapting to the new ways of working, like the remote first work. Like, look at this, okay? Goodbye to physical offices. This is something which even though we've lived in the post COVID era for the last 3-4 years now, but think about this at Bioeconomy, in the company where I am. We have team members in 15 plus countries, and our battle room is actually now a Notion document. And our strategy session actually happens across time zones on a document, right? So the ways of working have completely changed, and giving them access to these real time things and situations become extremely important, in addition to whatever Gen Z is and dealing with kind of people.
Yeah.
Very valid points on also decision making cycles being much quicker. And I mean, Purva's just laid it out there in terms of the kind of volatility they would face on a constant basis, right? And that would demand them to be extremely nimble, agile, but have to drop a lot of their very
Command.
structured decision making. Yeah,
Yes.
that you just got to take the decision and move on and wait for it to succeed or fail, as against in the forces where they would strategize to succeed
Yes.
for the most part, and then failure, choice of failure is
Not a
actually not
choice.
there,
I would say it is
right?
good that they don't
Yeah.
keep that as a choice, and that's why we are in secure
And
hands.
here, yeah, and here that's never a constraint you would consider. I mean, you never think about it that way. That's not driving your decision process.
Yes, yes, absolutely. No, I think we got some fantastic inputs on this one because it is what it is, and I think the ways of working, it's such a important aspect. Many of us who have worked in corporate take it for granted that you change company, you'll survive. You have worked for 10 years, but yes, I think the ways of working, the software aspects, how things get done on the ground, it's so important for many to learn, and of course, veterans, when they come in folds of the corporate roles and responsibilities they work with. And generations, yeah, I think someone pointed out, yeah, you pointed out some people leave early, yeah, because of the commissioning. So short service people will leave with between 10 to 14 years of service. Uh, yes, definitely people who have not spent a lot of time, but given how forces are structured, it is obviously the charter of duty, the chain of command that they follow, and they go about that because we any change or any, I think, disruption in that is going to cost us. And maybe as an organization, it's not how they are structured. So that's why we feel there is a difference even in millennials, in Forge versus others, right? And many of them don't have those kind of exposure very early. But yeah, with the technologies, with the social media and everything being available, many are learning very quickly. So that's the point I wanted to bring out, that many short service folks spend a lot of time learning, upskilling themselves. They recognize this as a gap and they want to address it. So as they're transitioning, I get so many veterans, having those conversations around what certification they should be doing, what technologies they should be learning about. So, kind of getting into the groove before they exit, at least a year and a half before. So I think you see a very fungible talent, and really looking forward to that change. Yeah. So that's something I just wanted to call that out.
Sure.
Yep.
All right, we are on time, but just last, if I could ask each one of you to sum up your closure thoughts, very quickly in a minute and a half, what do you guys think veterans as a community or employers as a community, we are all part of the system, should do to ensure we are making this a more vibrant, inclusive work environment for our military veterans to not only get into, but also be successful in it. And we can start with Ravindra, you, if that's okay.
Sure, yeah. So I would say this is a, multi-layered approach, right? It kind of starts right from the armed forces itself. They kind of established as Director General of Resettlement, which takes care of their placement, and as per data available last year, it seems there are about 60,000 odd veterans that come out, and only 50% were about to be placed, so a little less than 50% were placed,
Less
right?
than,
So what?
way less than
Way
50%,
less than
Ravindra. Way
50%,
less
yeah.
than, because
About
we've looked at the data, and I think not even 5%, not even 2% get properly absorbed in the private sector.
absolutely, absolutely. So I guess, see, the attempt has to be, I would say, redefined at every level. It kind of starts from the source itself. What are they doing? How are they finding position? How are they preparing such people? Be it, right, youngsters in Agni, be it short service commission people, be it anyone who probably has met with an accident, injury in the war, etc., etc. The multiple reasons why would they come out before their retirement age, right? So for each of such cases, they'll have to very diligently plan their absorption in the society, right? So that is one. It kind of starts from there, and then comes the government. Now, government has also taken multiple initiatives in terms of, say, for example, there are production link incentive plans that are out there for manufacturing unit. And if you see the defense export from India has kind of risen in past 10 years about 4 times, and there are multiple startup companies that have started manufacturing these high-tech equipments, these parts that are required into artillery and other equipments. So there is great amount of need under Atmanirbhar Bharat and other multiple schemes that government of India has started. But then how do we ensure that we expose them to these schemes? How do we ensure that they're aware of how can they hit the ground running? So that is the government layer. And then comes the private players, right? Leaders of the industry. How do they design company policies so that there is a mechanism in which they are absorbed, not in an ad hoc manner, but then as a policy stance that they can take. And then the last layer is people who will be working with them. What kind of environment can be provided, plus what can we learn from them, because this is a great opportunity also to learn from such addition into the organization. So I would say it's a multi-layered approach. Each layer has to work at its best to make it possible. It cannot be a responsibility of
Yes.
just one layer to make it possible. With that, I'll really thank you, and it was really pleasant and insightful participating in such a learned group. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Ravinder. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ravindra. I'll just add that they made the choice to be in military. They made the choice to protect us and our businesses. It's just that we owe it to them that we find a way of getting them transitioned into what they need, because they were there to protect us. Now it is our turn to get to them what they need in getting whatever is required to be done. So I think it's our job to make that happen. As an entrepreneur, I'll just say that typical questions that come, whether you are in front of an investor for a funding round, the why am I doing this, or why you as a team is getting into this particular problem solving. If that particular piece is pretty clear in their mind, they are able to have that experience behind, then that is going to something that will always help in putting that front. I'm sure that they will do a good job in terms of presenting, handling different kinds of situations, but they are going to need some transitional help from somebody who has been in business as well.
Absolutely.
Beautiful point, Yogeshji. And I would just want to add to this, that people like at our levels, what can we practically do? I think create mentorship opportunities, like pairing veterans with startup leaders and
Exactly.
letting them get a real feel, because let's admit it, like people like us, even though we were very close to startups, etc., I really struggled big time when I made that move from corporate to my first startup. I ended up leaving that startup in 1.5 years, and then the second experience was much better, and I'm still with them and I'm loving every bit of it. But just think about it, like, as civilians we struggle so much. So looking at a very different sort of a way of working, etc. How do we actually do that? The practicality, give them a safe space to learn, experiment. That is what is needed, according to me.
I mean, I think everybody's got, all the thoughts that I had in my mind. And I think there are two aspects to this, right? Some of them might choose to become entrepreneurs themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that some of us who have come, most of the entrepreneurs today have spent some time in corporate. And I think maybe collectively we should look at some kind of a cohort, like Purva was mentioning, how can we mentor some of these entrepreneurs from who are starting out after the stint in the armed forces or the forces in general. Can we create that? But if you look on the other hand, many of them are, that are moving into corporate India, perhaps moving into the larger, more structured organizations in manufacturing, services, whatever they might be. And I think those organizations, like Ramindra was saying, has have to have policy focus at two levels. One is, of course, the recruitment policy, right? How inclusive it is. We talk about D&I today, and I think including veterans, should become as important an agenda on the at the conversation table, and to actually put down some very clear goals in the company's scorecard, right? In terms of hiring, and set out targets. And once you have that kind of a focus, then somebody is going to sit and think about the appropriate departments that can take these targets, because we know
Yes.
that they are most suited for certain kinds of roles given their background. And so policy is at recruitment level, taking it into goal setting is very important. And then in terms of assimilating and helping them transition, that is, I would say, not a challenge, because any large organization has a good program usually in place to transition people into the workforce, considering a lot of campus recruitment happens. And today, little bit challenging considering we have this hybrid model and we're actually not meeting people, but they're used to always being
Yes.
with the group, with their team, with their battalion, with their, it's all about many hands and many minds together achieving a goal. And so that adds another layer of a challenge while they are trying to kind of get into the into the skin of things in corporate. And I think so there again at a policy level to have some focused transition programs, right, and onboarding as they call it, and a good buddy system perhaps at their level within the same
Yes.
organization to kind of not just buddy them to tell them where the food court is or where they can find the bank on campus, but a little bit more than that, to get them to help with the whole unlearning and relearning we've been talking about. And I think both of these need a lot of policy focus in large organizations. In an entrepreneurial setup, if they're joining an entrepreneurial setup, it's trial by fire for them. And so there, I think the founders and the leadership team are pretty much their buddies. And so if they can establish, right, that kind of an amazing work relationship, which again, a little bit of unlearning and relearning, because you're not going to have hierarchy, no chain of command. That's probably the first barrier to break, but I think that can be done. And then they're going to be able to just be themselves. And so yeah, I mean, it just needs a conscious effort from us as employers, from us as folks who are transitioning them into their roles and their teams, to make that little bit more of an effort in terms of policy and structure and procedures.
Absolutely. I think very important point, Priya. Something that is taken as a goal, something that can be measured, can be improved. I think that's all we all believe in and we're kind of lived with. We eat and breathe data, and we want to look at how many we hired, how many worked out. So I think very important. And I always say that representation matters so much. Rather than someone standing up saying, you know what, I want to hire veterans. Get two veterans, show people why you want to hire and show what they bring to the table. I think that's a much more fungible way to go about things when you showcase, that's the product and see why I invested in this person and how it turns out to be. And then obviously it's easier to drive those conversations, especially with hiring managers, teams where you are embedding this talent, right? So I think some very, very important, pertinent points. And, I really want to thank you all for joining in today. It was really very insightful and absolutely something that every military veteran is going to learn and understand a lot about the ecosystem that is such vibrant place in India, at least to be today. So thank you so much for taking our time for the conversation today. And we'd love to work with you all on some of the pointers that you've spoken about and see if we can put something more structured and as an offering to our veteran community. We'd love to work with you all.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Rashmi.
Rashmi.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure.
Thank
Yes,
you.
yes.
Have a good one. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you.